The wait is finally over, people. We have made it to draft day, or as I like to call it, Christmas. Today we've got a first round mock draft for the 2026 NFL draft. A final predictive mock trying to guess what's going to happen. Not necessarily what I would do, although I will give my thoughts on all 32 picks. I do want to start off by apologizing that we did not have a normal draft cycle this year with a bunch of content. I fell behind early when I wanted to get started because I was sick for a week and then, just got busy and all that. But I've still been very much following along with the pre-draft process, and I feel pretty confident in my mock draft today. So let's not waste any time. Let's get this show on the road. In an absolute stunner, I had the Raiders picking Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback from Indiana, number 1 overall. What an absolute shocker. I will point out that I feel like every year when there's a consensus number 1 pick, or at least recently, we have the conversation of, is this player going to want to play here? Is he going to force his way out? We did it with Joe Burrow and the Bengals. We did it with Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, and it was just a bunch of nonsense. Caleb Williams with the Bears, although there was later some chatter that his camp had thought about it. But I feel like this year we didn't do that, which is a good thing because it would be a complete waste of time. Or at least I feel like most of us didn't overthink it. But really ever since the Raiders got the number 1 pick, this has been in Sharpie. There has not been any real discussion about it. There will be any real discussion about it tomorrow night. Fernando Mendoza probably is already learning the playbook by now. He is a Las Vegas Raider. It is in Sharpie. It is in pen. It is happening. Number 2 is where things get really interesting. The conversation over the last handful of weeks has been between Ohio State's Arvell Reese and Texas Tech's David Bailey. And I feel like the betting odds and the insiders, it's been back and forth over the last week. One day it's Bailey, one day it's Reese, so on and so forth. Right now, the odds, at least as of when I'm recording this, which is at about 1 in the morning, Thursday morning, the odds seem to favor David Bailey going number 2 to the Jets, and I'm not buying it. I feel like this is some sort of smokescreen. I don't know why they would be smokescreening it because, well, we know Fernando Mendoza is going to be the number 1 pick. The Jets have been on the clock really for 4 months. But I do think they prefer Arvell Reese. I think a lot of the signs are there. It seems like a lot of the people in the building in New York, at least a lot of the reporters and the beat people, they kind of think it's Arvell Reese. The Jets canceled David Bailey's top 30 visit. I don't really think that means anything. I know people are kind of reading into that. I think it's more so the Jets have kind of already made their decision. They're keeping their hand close to their chest. They don't really want anybody to figure it out. There also was an interview today with David Bailey talking about the Jets general manager, referring to him as Monty, as in Monty Ossenfort, which is the Cardinals general manager. Again, I'm not really going to look into it, but I do kind of think Arvell Reese really fits their defense. I think he's going to fit what Aaron Glenn is looking for. And of the two, I think he's the better pick. I've got some questions about David Bailey in the run game. Sure, he had 14 and a half sacks this year, and there's a lot to like with David Bailey. Some of those sacks, though, the tackle reps on the offensive side were really, really bad. So I think we need to account for that as well. I don't know if I would pick either of these guys here, number 2. I think totally in a vacuum. I really like Rueben Bain. I think he's probably the best edge rusher in the class, even if he doesn't have the ceiling that Arvell Reese does. But I get the perspective here with the Jets. You need to go for the home run. Rueben Bain's probably not the home run swing that Arvell Reese is, a guy who can play linebacker, and he would be a really good linebacker right away. A high floor, yet high ceiling prospect. This isn't necessarily a tweener, a guy who doesn't really have a position. He's an awesome linebacker, but the idea is you can use him as a hybrid linebacker, hybrid edge. I know everybody likes to throw out the Micah Parsons comparison. His usage would look like that early on, and if he develops the pass rushing skills, then he would potentially turn into a regular edge. I trust the Cowboys with Parsons' development a whole lot more than I would the Jets, but I do see the allure for Arvell Reese, and I would not have the problem with this pick at all. Number 3, we've got a trade. There's going to be a lot of trades, I think, on draft night based on what much of the media is saying. Because there aren't as many blue chip prospects at the top of this class, it feels like there's going to be more movement. And it's been very apparent that the Arizona Cardinals do not want to pick here. They are looking to move back, and they, in my opinion, will have a dance partner in the Kansas City Chiefs, who will trade picks 9, 29, and a 2027 third rounder to move up to number 3 for David Bailey. The Chiefs are in an interesting spot because there's a number of options they could go with at number 9, but I really don't think Caleb Downs is going to be there. I'm not convinced Rueben Bain is going to be there. Maybe they go with one of the receivers, but at least one of Carnell Tate and Jordan Tyson will probably be off the board. Maybe they're scared of Jordan Tyson's medical question marks. So I could see them moving all the way up for Bailey. And if the Jets pick Bailey at 2, I could see them doing this for Arvell Reese as well. Maybe they would even prefer Reese. But David Bailey gives them a really intriguing athlete on the defensive line. He gives them some more explosiveness. He gives them a guy to pair with Chris Jones and George Karlaftis, who had a disappointing season after they paid him big money. It gets Spagnuolo a true blue chip potential prospect on the edge. And I don't think I would use the top 3 pick on David Bailey personally. I certainly would not trade up into the top 3. I think this would be a mistake by the Kansas City Chiefs to trade both of their first round picks. But I see the allure. I see the upside. I wouldn't do it, but they're swinging through the fences. Number 4, Jeremiah Love to the Tennessee Titans. I don't think Jeremiah Love gets past 5. 7 is the absolute floor, but really 3 through 5 would be my guess. The Titans have kind of been the favorite for a while, but now there's a lot of buzz the Cardinals would be interested. Now it sounds like maybe the Titans wouldn't do this. I think it's smoke. I think he's Tennessee's guy. I think you put him next to Cameron Ward, you're able to try to establish the run game. Sure, the offensive line is definitely not the greatest, which, as we saw with Ashton Jeanty last year, was kind of a problem. But I think it wouldn't be as big of a deal for Jeremiah Love because, for one thing, I don't think the rest of the offense is going to be as much of a black hole. The quarterback play is going to be a lot better than it was for the Raiders. And Jeremiah Love is such an asset in the passing game as well. It gives Cameron Ward an underneath option. Obviously, Cam Ward's a guy who likes to scramble around, who likes to improvise, who likes to make plays out of structure. But by getting a guy like Jeremiah Love, it gives you someone who you can dump it off to in the short game and be a threat to make anyone miss when he has the ball. So I think this would be a great pick for the Titans. I think he's the best player in the draft. If you don't want to pick a running back at 4 because you want to prioritize the trenches, I get it. It's hard to argue with it. But in terms of pure talent, I think Jeremiah Love is the best player here. If not him, though, it might be Caleb Downs. I think everyone's overthinking it. Caleb Downs is one of the best players in the draft. I think he's going to go earlier than people think. I'm convinced it's going to be at number 5 to the New York Giants. I would say the sweet spot for Downs in mock drafts is probably the 7 to 9 or 10 range. I've seen him lower than that in the 13, 14 area. I think he's going to go early. I think everyone is trying to talk themselves out of it. But the fact of the matter is, Caleb Downs is a damn good football player. And the Giants have made it pretty clear with John Harbaugh that positional value will not be of the priority. We've seen many major media people suggest that teams at the top are not focused on positional value, given that the blue chippers at those premier spots are not as good as other years. Yet we have an elite linebacker, an elite safety, elite linebackers in this class. So I think this makes a lot of sense for the Giants. They're getting an awesome player. The Ravens pick Kyle Hamilton in the first round. They pick Malachi Starks in the first round. So John Harbaugh's done it. It's a little bit different given that the investment is the 5th pick of the draft rather than 14 with Hamilton or 27 with Malachi Starks. But to me, this pick makes a lot of sense. And I'm kind of convinced that Caleb Downs will end up as a New York Giant in 24 hours from now. This might be too obvious of a trade, but the Cleveland Browns have made it very apparent that they are looking to move back. And it seems like the Dallas Cowboys really want to move up, particularly for Sonny Styles. And I think this trade makes a lot of sense. The Browns are going to get picks 12, 20, and 112 in exchange for 6 and 39. So the Browns now have 3 first-round picks in this year's draft to address many of their needs on the offensive side of the ball. Cleveland does have their pick of the litter of the receivers and the offensive linemen, but I think they're really going to prioritize O-line, and I think you can get better value at number 12. Dallas, meanwhile, they had the 2 number 1s. It seems like they really want a blue-chip defensive player. Arvell Reese is gone. David Bailey is gone. Caleb Downs is gone. So they feel like they have to move up for Sonny Styles, who probably would not make it past number 7 if he got that far. Sonny Styles gives this defense a really, really intriguing player. I have my hesitancies about picking Sonny Styles this high because as much as the physical talent is there and the ceiling for him is that of the best linebacker in the league, the positional value would suggest that picking him this early, he has to be one of the very best players at the position. And I think in comparison to Jeremiah Love and Caleb Downs, he's just not there yet in his development. So I'd be a little bit hesitant, personally, to trade 2 first-round picks if I was Dallas to go and do this. But if Sonny Styles hits, then you're getting a guy who offenses have to game plan around. And offenses have to build their structure week to week around playing against Sonny Styles. So this is a big swing for Dallas, but it seems like Jerry Jones wants to be aggressive, and it seems like they want to take the big swing. Carnell Tate at number 7 to the Commanders, the top receiver off the board. Personally, if I had my choice of the receivers, I think Jordan Tyson from Arizona State is the best one in this draft. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks about the medical with Tyson. It seems like those have come back cleaner than expected over the last week or two, which is obviously a good sign for him. But Carnell Tate's a very good player in his own right. I would say him and Mekhi Lemon are sort of in that second tier for me for wide receiver 2. I honestly think Lemon's probably a tiny bit better, but I think the fit with Carnell Tate in Washington makes a lot of sense, and I really do not have a major complaint about this pick. He's a very good player in his own right. Obviously, he wasn't the wide receiver 1 at Ohio State. That was Jeremiah Smith, but to be fair, every receiver in this class would not have been the wide receiver 1 at Ohio State. So I think Carnell Tate would be a really fun addition for this offense. They need a number 2 receiver really badly to pair up with Terry McLaurin and potentially a long-term number 1, given that McLaurin is not getting any younger. Ruben Bain to the New Orleans Saints at number 8. They need a disruptor on the defensive line. I thought Chase Young had a pretty solid season last year, but they need another guy, and this would be a slam dunk pick for the New Orleans Saints, who I think are close to competing in the NFC South. And I think nailing this pick, getting a guy like Ruben Bain, would absolutely put them in position to potentially contend for the NFC South. I get the arm length, and I get the question marks that exist with Ruben Bain, but the guy was a game wrecker this year. I think you can move him around a little bit on the defensive line, and I think he's going to be a monster in the league, despite the super short arms. I think he's going to be able to overcome that because he's that good of a prospect, and he checks off that many boxes otherwise. And the Saints have some good players on that defensive line. I think he can be the missing piece that kind of puts it together. At number 9, I have the Kansas City Chiefs obviously trading out of this pick to the Cardinals, and I had them picking Francis Maui-Noa, the tackle out of Miami. He plays right tackle. Paris Johnson plays on the left side. It makes a lot of sense. The Cardinals need offensive line for whoever's going to play quarterback this year. Maybe they're going to draft one. Hint, hint. Maui-Noa does have some new medical question marks about his back. I haven't seen anything that suggests it would push him down the board. So for now, I'm going to have him as the top offensive lineman going to the Cardinals at number 9. I think this would be overall a win for Arizona. You move back, you add the additional first-round pick, and I think Maui-Noa is more than fine at number 9. I probably don't think I'd put him as a top 10 player in this class, but I think all of the offensive linemen, or at least a lot of the top offensive tackles for me, are fairly equal. So naturally, a guy who's going to go at, say, 15, 16, 17 is probably going to be better value than here at number 9. But I don't have a major complaint with this for Arizona. And then number 10, Jordan Tyson. I think he is outstanding. I think health permitting, he's one of the 3 or 4 best players in the draft, going to the New York Giants, who seem to have a lot of interest in him. I think this would be a slam dunk first round for John Harbaugh in New York. I kind of don't have a ton of confidence that Jordan Tyson is going to make it to number 10. This is just kind of how the board played out. If Jordan Tyson goes with one of the other picks, maybe to New Orleans or Washington, I think Vega Ioane, the guard from Penn State, would be a name to watch out for here. A lot of people aren't putting him in the top 10. I think it would make a lot of sense. But with Jordan Tyson here, I think it's going to be hard for the Giants to pass him up. They need another receiver opposite of Malik Nabers, whose health status is still up in the air on if he's going to be ready to go or not next year. But assuming he's healthy, you've got a filthy 1-2 punch with Malik Nabers on one side, Jordan Tyson on the other. Jackson Dart has 2 hell of a receivers to get the ball to. To me, Mansour Delane is one of the cleanest prospects in this draft. The Dolphins have a major need at corner. They're getting John Eric Sullivan from Green Bay. I go back to 2018. Their top 2 picks were both corners. They doubled down. Jair Alexander in the first round, Josh Jackson in the second round. They're getting Jeff Hafley from Green Bay, the defensive coordinator who for much of his career was a defensive backs coach. So I think it would make sense that the Dolphins, a team who has more holes than just about anybody, would prioritize adding to the secondary, especially when the value lines up perfectly with Mansour Delane at number 11. This feels like a home run pick. Outstanding season. This is a guy who you can absolutely stick on an island, put in man coverage. And I think based on what he did last year at LSU, this is a guy who I think pretty quickly could become one of the better corners in the NFL. Spencer Fano goes to the Browns at number 12. Will he play tackle at the next level? Will he play guard? Guess what? The Browns need both. They have DeJuan Jones at left tackle. He has a lot of medical question marks. It's unclear if you can trust him to play. At right guard, Tevin Jenkins, it's the exact same conversation. The Browns added Zion Johnson, who's going to play left guard. They added Titus Howard, who's going to play right tackle. But they still have 2 holes on this offensive line. And luckily, they had 3 first-round picks to try to work this out. Fano primarily played right tackle at Utah over the last couple of years with Caleb Lomu, another possible first rounder, playing on the left side. So maybe Fano kicks inside to guard. Maybe you try to convert him to left tackle. I think given his positional flexibility and given the Browns need both spots, I think the fit could make a lot of sense. All right, this is one of the spicier picks I have. Number 13, the Los Angeles Rams select Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon. I think the Rams are going to do everything in their power to move up for Jordan Tyson. However, as I look at number 7, where I think the conversation starts, I think Washington's the only team that would consider moving down because they don't have a second-round pick. But they would lose out on Tyson. They would lose out on Carnell Tate. If they like Makai Lemon enough, I think it would make a lot of sense. But if they have the top 2 guys on their own pedestal, I could see them sticking and picking. New Orleans at number 8, I think Ruben Bain is too much of a home run to say no. And then the Cardinals, they already moved back. They get their top offensive lineman of choice. So I would watch out for number 7 as a possible trade up if it happens. But I have the Rams sticking at number 13. And Kenyon Sadiq might seem like a strange pick because they drafted Terrence Ferguson with their top pick last year in the second round, who, of course, played ahead of Kenyon Sadiq at the University of Oregon. But the Rams are a team who runs 12 personnel, and I'm sure Sean McVay could find many creative ways to use Kenyon Sadiq out wide. Makai Lemon is an option here, and I don't think he'd be a bad pick at all. I think Lemon's actually the better prospect than Kenyon Sadiq, and that's probably what I would do given the choice. But I could totally see Sean McVay going for the home run and picking a guy like Kenyon Sadiq, who's a total freak athlete, and you don't really know how he's going to be used just yet, but I would certainly trust the Rams to get the most out of a player like him. I think that would be a really fun pick. Vega Owane to the Ravens at number 14. I feel like this is too obvious and it's not going to happen because everyone kind of is predicting it. And as I said, I could totally see him going to number 10 to the New York Giants. And I wanted to find a way to get him at number 10, but with Jordan Tyson there, I figured that's what the Giants would prefer. In this scenario, though, he does make it to number 14, and given how putrid the guard play was last year for the Ravens, I don't think they're going to let him slip much further. I think he's one of the probably 5 or 6 best football players in this draft, and this is what Baltimore does. They don't account for positional value too much. They like good football players, and Vega Owane is certainly that. Number 15, I've got a trade. I think the Bucs moving down makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of the guys who they would like are probably going to be there in the 20s. And I look at the Philadelphia Eagles, who have been linked to potentially trading up. I've seen rumors of teams trying to pass someone like Detroit at number 17, maybe Carolina at 19, Cleveland now at 20, the Steelers at 21. All those teams need offensive tackles. I could see the Eagles moving up for their tackle of choice. They are going to have to move not only number 23, but also 54 in the second round, along with pick 178 for 15 and 155. It's a pretty steep price for the Eagles, but they do it the Jets' third rounder. I would assume that was part of the Hassan Reddick trade. So they have another pick in the 50-60 range. They feel like they can utilize their own second rounder to move up and get their guy in Monroe Freeling out of the University of Georgia. Yes, Howie Roseman picks another Georgia player. That's not the reason why I think this fit makes a lot of sense. Freeland's a hot name throughout the pre-draft process, and he has risen quickly. A really impressive athlete, 6'7", 315. The flashes are really, really high. And with the Eagles, he doesn't have to play this year. I don't think he's as technically refined as some of the other tackles in this range, but that's okay. This is what Howie Roseman does. He drafts guys, he sits them for a year, lets them develop. Lane Johnson probably is at the end. I would think he has one more year, and then he's probably done. Monroe Freeling primarily has played left tackle throughout his career. He does have snaps on the right side. I think the idea is that he would be the long-term right tackle in 2027 and beyond. It's a steep price, but I could see the Eagles preferring him over the other guys enough so to try to jump, say, Detroit or Carolina or Cleveland or Pittsburgh to ensure they get him. Because Monroe Freeling, I would be really surprised if he falls to number 22. I almost had him going to Cleveland at number 12, and I could even see Cleveland picking him at number 6. I would pick Makai Lemon earlier than this. I don't think he should fall to number 16. But it does seem like the buzz on his name has certainly not been as high as Carnell Tate and certainly not Jordan Tyson as of late. But I think this would be a phenomenal pick for the Jets, and I think this would be a really good first round for them. Makai Lemon is obviously a primary slot guy. He has gotten his fair share of snaps on the outside throughout his career, so he doesn't have to be a slot-only guy. And I think teams are seeing the value of these slot guys who can do a little bit of everything. The Jackson Smith and Jigbas of the world. Obviously, he's an extreme example because he's a slot guy who can really stretch the field. But you look at someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit, how valuable he is for that offense as a guy who primarily plays in the slot but can do more than that. To me, I think Mekhi Lemon would make a lot of sense here. He'd be a great fit, a perfect complement for Garrett Wilson, who's already the number one. And I think this would be an awesome receiver duo. I think this would be an amazing pick for the Jets. Number 17, my beloved Detroit Lions. Offensive tackle feels like it makes the most sense. It's one of the biggest needs on the roster. Larry Borom is currently the projected starter opposite of Penei Sewell. Penei Sewell might move over to the left side. He might stick it right. The Lions and Dan Campbell kind of soft launched a potential move during the owners' meeting. But I think given where this tackle class is, picking a tackle here makes too much sense. Maybe they look on the defensive line. Maybe they look in the back end. But for me, I think the Lions need to get on base. Swing for a single, swing for a double. They don't need to swing for the fences. You don't need a Hall of Famer. You don't need an All-Pro. You need someone who can start on the offensive line because the O-line in the second half of the year was really not good. And everyone likes to say that Jared Goff needs this, he needs that, he needs a really good offensive line to be successful. Jared Goff was more than fine with poor offensive line play last year. Now, there were some really bad games. The Minnesota one was obviously a disaster. But I feel like the run game was more of an issue down the stretch. We could not establish the run really the last third of the year. Jahmyr Gibbs was not as effective as he's been. The usage of David Montgomery was not enough to begin with. The run game was bad. That kind of forced the Lions to kind of get out of their element as this big, tough, gritty, hard-nosed football team that loves to run the ball. So to me, I think Blake Miller makes so much sense at number 17. I would be doing jumping jacks if this happens on draft night. Blake Miller has started over 50 games of college football, a 5-year player at Clemson who checks off a lot of boxes. He's super durable. He's good in the passing game. He's good in the run game. And to me, this feels like 10 years ago, picking Taylor Decker. The Lions are looking for a guy who can start at offensive tackle for a decade. And I think that can be Blake Miller. This is a perfect fit. He can play right tackle where he's natural. Penei Sewell moves over to the left side. I think Blake Miller is going to make it to number 17. And I think this just makes too much sense. I would be over the moon if the Lions did this, and I would certainly imagine it is in heavy consideration. I think it makes too much sense not to be in consideration. Number 18, that brings us to the Minnesota Vikings. This has been another really common theme of team and player pairing, so I hate to be redundant, but it just makes too much sense. They need a safety in the back end who can cover space as your center field coverage guy, and to me, Dylan Thieneman is awesome. He had a tremendous season at Oregon. This is a top 6, 7 player in the draft for me. And I think the discussion that I've kind of seen over the internet lately is people who think that Dylan Thieneman is closer to safety number 1, Caleb Downs, than safety number 3, which is probably Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. I think AJ Halsey from LSU might be in that conversation as well. I agree, though, that Dylan Thieneman is closer to safety 1 than safety 3. And a lot of people are kind of taking that idea as a dig at Caleb Downs. I think Caleb Downs is awesome. This is not meant to be a dig at him at all. I just think Dylan Thieneman is that good. He is a tremendous cover player. He had a ridiculously good season at Oregon. I could see him going earlier than this. If Dallas doesn't trade up at 12, I think they make a lot of sense. Hell, Detroit at number 17. I get there's Kirby Joseph. I get there's Brian Branch. But both of those guys have serious question marks. Brian Branch is not under contract after this year. He's coming off a torn Achilles. Kirby Joseph, his knee might be cooked. I think the medical staff completely mismanaged that, but that's a whole nother story for another day. And there are other teams who could look at him. The Jets, I think, could be in the mix. The Rams don't need safety, but the Rams will find ways to make anything work with just about anyone. And who knows, some other team could pop in with a trade. But Minnesota stays at number 18. They get Thieneman. Awesome pick. Number 19, the Carolina Panthers need some juice on offense. They've picked receiver in the first round 2 years in a row with mixed results. Xavier Legette looks like a miss. Teteroa McMillan, who I was very high on coming out of Arizona, he is legit. But they might triple down for a third year in a row. Omar Cooper Jr. might be the obvious pick to some, maybe Denzel Boston, but I had them going in a different direction with Casey Concepcion out of Texas A&M. I would prefer Omar Cooper in this spot if I'm being honest, but Casey is a really intriguing player. This guy's got a lot of juice. He's super explosive with the ball in his hands. He's not the biggest, 5'11", 190, but he gives something that I think Carolina doesn't have, a really dynamic playmaker with the ball. I'm super high on Jalen Coker. I like him a lot, but I don't think Jalen Coker is going to stop Carolina from using another first-rounder on a receiver. Concepcion had a really, really good year with the Aggies. He was awesome 2 years ago as a true freshman at NC State. And I think a sign that a player is going to develop is that young breakout age. Guys who perform well early on. And Casey Concepcion as a true freshman was fantastic with the Wolfpack. I don't know exactly how he's going to be used at the next level, whether it's going to be truly out wide in the slot. He got snaps in both last year, maybe even a little bit as a gadget guy. I'm curious to see how Dave Canales in Carolina is going to make it work with him. And then at number 20, the Cleveland Browns select Caden Proctor out of Alabama, doubling down on the offensive line. I had them picking Spencer Fano at number 12, and now it's Proctor at number 20. Caden Proctor is an absolute mammoth of a human being. He has the size to play tackle. Does he have the long-term ability to? Does he have the movement skills to do so? That's to be determined. He would be a ridiculously good guard, though. And guess what? They need a tackle, and they need a guard. The Browns are drafting 2 offensive tackles with Fano and Proctor with the idea that you try both of these guys out at tackle. Maybe one of them works. Maybe one of them kicks inside to guard. And if they're both great at tackle, great. That's awesome. You got 2 bookend tackles. I get they traded and extended Titus Howard, but I mean, that would be a really good problem to have if both of these guys end up being awesome tackles. But if one of them you got to kick into guard, you can certainly do that. And all of a sudden, this offensive line looks a lot better. And they still have another pick at number 24. So I think this could really work out for the Browns. I'm personally hesitant to use a top 20 pick on Caden Proctor, especially with the idea of playing him at tackle. But I see the vision here for Cleveland, even if I don't love the value. The Pittsburgh Steelers at number 21 select Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana. I'm a big fan of his game. I think he's the number 4 receiver in this class, and I think you can make an argument that he might be closer to 3 than 5. Maybe a little bit of a hot take. I don't know if I'd be willing to get there, but I think it's close. Omar Cooper's awesome. I think he's a perfect fit in the slot. With DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman, your big body, your physical, your outside receivers, you get Omar Cooper in the slot, a guy who can really run routes, a guy who had a phenomenal season this year at Indiana with Fernando Mendoza. I think he fits what the Steelers already have really, really well. I get they used, a top 100 pick a couple years ago on Roman Wilson, but that experiment seems like it has run its course. I think this would be a really, really fun trio of guys who complement each other's skill sets very well. Obviously, the question is who's going to throw these guys the ball. Could they pick Ty Simpson here? I think they're going to scare themselves off given the Kenny Pickett disaster a few years ago. I kind of have a hard time believing it won't be Aaron Rodgers again next year, but we'll see. Number 22, I've got another trade. The Chicago Bears are moving up 3 spots, giving 25, 129, and a 6th rounder next year to the Chargers for 22 and 204 to move up and get Keldrick Falk out of Auburn. This, to me, screams Dennis Allen and his fingertips all over it. Keldrick Falk is interesting to me because obviously the pass rush ability. He had 9 sacks as a sophomore, only 2 this past year. I have my questions with him, but this is a guy who's an awesome run defender. He's shown the pass rush ability in the past. I think there's a high ceiling with him, and I don't like him, say, in the top 10 to 15, which I know a handful of people share that opinion. I think people in the NFL might have that opinion. But I also think the hate on him has gone a little far from others. I think there's absolutely a world where Keldrick Falk is able to make it work. And one of the best fits for him, I think, is with Dennis Allen in Chicago. I think this will be a really good move for them. Jumping the Buccaneers, who could be a natural fit for him. But given that they traded back, they could be comfortable with multiple guys. And I think Akeem Mesidor from Miami, who I think is quite a bit better than Keldrick Falk at this point in time. Now, obviously, we have to keep in mind the age difference. Akeem Mesidor is, I think, more than 4 years older than Keldrick Falk, which is obviously a big negative for Mesidor. He's 25, but he's a really good player. He's new to the position. So I go back to the young breakout age. I talked about it with Casey Concepcion. You can obviously apply it to many other players in this class, but you're maybe thinking, why did it take Mesidor this long to figure it out? Well, Akeem Mesidor is new to playing edge. So I think it doesn't fully apply to him because he's still new to the position. He obviously wasn't really on anyone's radar prior to this year where he was incredible. But this is a guy who's still learning the position. And obviously the age isn't ideal, but I still feel like there's another level that he can get to because he's still very much developing as an edge rusher. So I don't really have a problem with picking Akeem Mesidor in the first round. He's a really good player with room to get better. Sure, you don't love that he's 25, but a lot of NFL teams are drafting for the present. And Akeem Mesidor is a guy who I think right now is going to be really good, especially you look at the Bucks, who I think are absolutely drafting with the focus of winning in 2026. Todd Bowles' seat is scorching hot. If Tampa Bay doesn't have a good year, I think there will be some very uncomfortable conversations with other people in the Bucks, and maybe they start to tear it down a little bit. So because of that, I think the focus for them is to try to win in 2026. The NFC South is a very winnable division. Let's try to get a really good football player while simultaneously adding a pick in the second round from the Eagles, another opportunity to get another starter. The Browns are number 24, their third pick of the day. They doubled down on offensive line to start with Spencer Fano and Caden Proctor. Now they get their receiver, Denzel Boston. Big body out of Notre Dame. Are you going to play him on the outside, or are you going to play him as the big slot? Dynamic ability in the red zone. I've still got some questions with Boston. I'm not as quite high on him as others, but I think after that top 3 or 4 group of receivers, there is quite a bit of a drop-off. And now that the Browns obviously don't have their second round pick, I don't think they feel super comfortable waiting until the third round to get a guy. So I think the value here with Boston, given how the board has played out with both Concepcion and Cooper off the board, I get it. It's hard to complain too much. And then at number 25, I really like how the Chargers played this out because I would have given them Emmanuel Pregnon at number 22. It's a little bit rich for him. So you move down 3 spots, you add some picks from the Bears, and you still get your guy. I think he'll plug in really nicely at guard. He had a phenomenal season at Oregon last year. I think this is a very easy pick for the Chargers. I think they're in a similar spot that Detroit is. Let's hit a single. Let's hit a double. Let's get a guy who can start for us on the offensive line. Emmanuel Pregnon, I think, is going to be good to go day one. I feel like everyone and their mother believes that Ty Simpson will be the quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals, and I can't help it. I kind of agree. So they're going to move up 3 spots. Remember, they already got number 29 from Kansas City earlier. So they're going to trade up with Buffalo from number 29 to number 26. Buffalo, keep in mind, they don't have a second-round pick. They traded it for DJ Moore. So I could see them looking to move back, add an additional asset. How about 104 early in the 4th round to move back 3 spots? The Cardinals go up and get Ty Simpson. I have a lot of reservations about Ty Simpson. I think the floor is reasonably high. I don't see a world where he doesn't stick in the NFL for a while. He played in a pro-style offense at Alabama. I think the transition is going to be fairly seamless, and I don't think he's going to be awful right away. I think he'll be okay early on, but he's not the biggest. The physical tools are limited. This isn't a guy who's dynamic out of structure. So there are some physical limitations, and I don't think the other question marks are enough to make me want to pick him in the first round. This is a guy who was on the bench for 3 years at Alabama as a former 5-star recruit. He does not have a lot of experience, and I think there's a real parallel for quarterbacks going from college to the NFL. The guys who have played a lot of football and started a lot of games, they generally transition better to the league. Fernando Mendoza has played a lot of football from his time at Cal over to Indiana. Ty Simpson has 1 real year as a starter. So I have some questions with that. I don't think I'd touch him in the first round of the 10-foot pole. I think he'll be a fine player in the NFL, but I do think that there will be some long-term questions in terms of what level he can really get to. So I don't think I would do this if I was Arizona. Number 27, this might be the most surprising pick I had in the first round. I feel like everyone who I have going in round 1, I've seen in a first-round mock draft, really with the exception of Jeremy Bernard. But I love the fit in San Francisco. There's some Jawan Jennings in his game in the sense that he's really solid, he's really reliable. This is a guy who's going to get open on 3rd down for Brock Purdy. The ceiling isn't like sky high with Jeremy Bernard, but I think he's an instance where you know what you're going to get. And you're going to get a really solid number 2, number 3 complimentary guy who's going to be a good pro for like a decade. And I think the Niners, who lost Jawan Jennings, a guy who they loved, I think this makes a lot of sense as a fit. And Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, they haven't been afraid to shy away from consensus picking skill position players. Generally, it has not worked out. I think this go around it will. They signed Mike Evans. They signed Christian Kirk. They have Ricky Pearsall. Those guys, to me, are not enough to stop this. They have Brandon Ayuk. I think it's obvious he's not going to play another game for San Francisco. That ship has sailed. So I like this for the 49ers. I would be for it. I get offensive line as a possibility, and you still have some good ones available. But I love the fit with Jeremy Bernard. Maybe they trade down and do this, but with 6 receivers already off the board, I don't know if you can really afford to. Number 28, the Houston Texans. So I wanted to pick a defensive lineman here. with this spot, but I felt okay not doing it because the Texans pick again in like 10 picks. They had the Commanders' second rounder from the Laramie Tunsil deal. I wanted to give them Caden McDonald out of Ohio State, but even if you can't get Caden McDonald at 38 or whatever the number is, you can get somebody else. Peter Woods might still be available. Lee Hunter might still be available. Christian Miller, I think he's really good. That would be an awesome pick at number 38 overall. Caleb Banks, obviously he's more the upside swing. I don't think the Texans need to do that, given they have Will Anderson, they have Danielle Hunter. I think you go for more the safer choice. But there's a lot of options for them, and at least one of those guys is going to make it to 38. So I don't think they have to. They could also potentially trade up. Hint, hint. So I think you focus on the offensive line here, and we've seen a lot of them go. There aren't a ton of great ones left, and I think there is kind of a drop-off, particularly at tackle. So I think if you want Max Ihenacho, you've got to pick him now. I've really talked myself into Ihenacho. This is a guy who's new to football, started playing only 4 years ago in junior college, but he has developed quickly for Arizona. You look at his rapid development, you look at the athletic tools, and you see a guy who's got a really high ceiling. I could see a team like the Eagles talking themselves into it in the 20s. One of these other tackle-needy teams. Maybe Detroit really likes him. I think Detroit needs to go for the safer option, but I really wouldn't be that upset with Ihenacho because I think he can really play. And I think this would be a really nice pick for the Texans. They have Braden Smith at right tackle, who's a fine starter for now. You don't have to rush Ihenacho in there if you don't want to. They drafted Ariante Ursary last year, who can play on the left side. I would be totally for this for Houston. The Bills move back 3 spots. They get Chase Bisontis from Texas A&M. They have a big need at guard, and there has been quite a bit of buzz for Bisontis to go in the first round. I think this is a bit rich for me, but he's a need. He'll start. I get it. Colton Hood goes to the Dolphins at number 30. It is a Tennessee corner, maybe not the Tennessee corner that people think. I think Jermon McCoy can slip out of the first round. I think he's clearly a first-round level player. I think, as a prospect, he's right up there with Mansour Delane. You could easily argue him being higher than Delane. And if he was healthy, I probably would rank him above. But the medical stuff seems worrisome. And it's not about the torn ACL that caused him to miss his junior season, but it's about the new stuff, the long-term knee injury that could keep him out for his entire rookie year. I think teams are going to be scared off. I think we're going to see a Will Johnson slide. I could see him going even later than Will Johnson because Will Johnson was a guy who was heralded as this superstar corner the second he got to Michigan. Jermon McCoy was really good himself, but I don't think he has quite the pedigree that Will Johnson did. So maybe he goes even farther. I would suspect he goes early in the second round. And I think Colton Hood could be the choice here for the Dolphins, who doubled down on corner. They already drafted Mansour Delane at number 11, and I talked about the fit with the guys coming over from the Packers. They drafted Jair Alexander and Josh Jackson in the first and second rounds. Obviously, Jair was a big hit. Josh Jackson, not quite as much. But the Dolphins have so many needs. I think they're going to want to prioritize value. I get they have a lot of holes on offense. The receiving core is a joke. The offensive line isn't good, but the Dolphins have so many other picks throughout the draft. And with this team being in year 1 of the rebuild, they don't have to force the offensive need, but rather, let's try to build this secondary. They're getting guys from Green Bay. They're getting Jeff Hafley, who I think is going to really prioritize the back end. You're getting 2 solid corner prospects who are hopefully going to play off each other for the long term. 2 more to go. We'll start with New England at number 31. I've got them going Zion Young, the edge rusher out of Missouri. There's a couple edge rushers in this range to keep an eye on. TJ Parker, Cassius Howell, Malachi Lawrence, maybe even R. Mason Thomas or Gabe Yakas. Those guys will be really big surprises, but you never know. We've seen crazier. If I had to guess, I think this would be one of Lawrence or Zion Young. TJ Parker obviously didn't have the year that he would have hoped at Clemson, but there's a really good player in there. Cassius Howell, dominant in the SEC, but he has very large question marks in terms of the size profile. So I go back to Zion Young. I think, to me, this is clearly a first-round player, a really good run defender, an evolving and improving pass rusher, 6'5", 260. He's got the size. He's got the build. I think he fits the New England defensive scheme really well. I think this would be an awesome pick for them. And then we're going to wrap up round 1 with a trade. The Houston Texans, I hinted at this earlier, picking a defensive tackle, getting a guy like Caden McDonald. Guess what? They end up with him anyway. They move up to number 32, acquiring 32 and 188 from Seattle for 38, 106, 167. Seattle has what, 4 picks this year? I would imagine they are very much looking to trade down. They have not exactly hid their intentions of trying to move back. The Texans move up for Caden McDonald. And you plug him in the middle of that defense with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter going after the quarterback. Good luck. McDonald, I think, is a really sure thing in terms of what he's going to provide as a run defender, but I think he's got a little more in there as a pass rusher. I think this would be an A-plus first round for Houston, getting Ian Nacho at 28 and then Caden McDonald here. This would be an awesome scenario for them. Let me know what you thought of the mock draft down below in the comments. I think before day 2, I'll probably have a second and maybe even third round mock draft in the Discord server. The link is in the description to try to make up for not having as much content this year related to the draft. Again, I apologize about that. We'll be better next year, but still, it's been a very fun pre-draft process. It's a really intriguing draft class. I'm super excited to see how it all unfolds, and I'll be back here next week to grade them all. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Peace out.